In today's video, I'm going to be letting you know everything you need to know about round 3 of the Manufacturer series taking place at Spa. So GT1, 2 and 3 are all running the same endurance race of 30 laps with ×1 tyre wear, ×1 fuel, and make sure you buy your wet tyres. Now remember, it is a 30 lap endurance race with mixed conditions, so you are going to have to make sure you buy intermediates and the wet tyre. So to start off with, let's give you a rundown on an intermediate lap in the time trial session. So going into turn 1, we are going to be breaking slightly off the racing line that you'd normally be using, and we're going to be using that 100 board as a reference. Now the reason for that is because the wet line has more grip. So you can see the blue line is the wet line, the purple line is the normal line you'll be racing on. We're going to kind of cross over a little bit there and then try and rotate it into the corner and then try and get on the accelerator off the racing line again. Now the advantage of that is you're going to get better traction accelerating offline. Now one thing to point out with this is it is a lot better now with the current physics in the wet. It's a lot easier to drive, so I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it a lot more. Now working our way through a Rouge, you can see we're going to give it a lift off the throttle and then back onto throttle quite aggressively, almost similar to how you do it in the dry with these intermediate conditions here. Now one thing I did notice, like I said, was the grip is miles better. You have better traction, no need to run traction control really. In most conditions, even heavy wet, it wasn't really as essential as it used to be. And then again, also crossing over the dry line is much better now. So again, into the end of the straight here, we're going to be using that 100 board as our reference, and again breaking off that dry line just to give ourselves a bit better grip. And again, try and take slightly wider line through the apexes. You don't want to be right up to the curb because in the wet conditions them lines aren't as grippy. So again, you can see slightly wider than the normal dry line that you'd be using into that corner. And again, approaching the hairpin here, you can see I'm using more of a slightly off center. You can see there we're a little bit over to the left of center, but just avoiding that dry line in the braking phase and then going deep to get that, pick up that wet line on the outside, and then that gives you a better acceleration out of the corner. And again, tiny little bit of braking input here as we again try and take a wide line through the corner, just trying to avoid being too close to that dry line, and then accelerate on the curb. And again, I notice the curbs feel much better now on these new physics. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy these wet physics a lot more than what they used to with the old ones. Again, 50 board on the right hand side is a good reference for this long left hand corner. And again, you can see I'm trying to use that wide line, but you kind of, the way this corner is, you naturally use a bit of the dry line, but it is so much better now when you do get on that dry line. You will notice it straight away when you go in the time trial. Even in the heavy wet conditions, there is more of a noticeable difference between the dry and the wet, but it is definitely better. And again, into that corner, you can see taking that center line through so that you don't pick up that less grip on the dry line. Again, then into this next left hand corner, you can see again taking kind of a slightly wider line away from that apex, and then using a bit of the curb on acceleration into the next braking zone, using the start of the curb as your reference, braking before that, and again taking a slightly wider line to rotate it in here where the grip is more so in the middle of the track, and then accelerating out this corner. And again into this right hand corner, little lift off the throttle as we approach it, and then try not to get too close to the curb. Obviously in the dry you're right up to that curb, and using as much track as possible. In the wet, stay a little bit away from it, just use that slightly wider line where the grip is. And then again into this really fast section of track here, you can pretty much do this quite aggressively with the intermediates. Even though the rain there is getting close to the full wet line, you can see a little dab of the brakes as we're on the outside by the green Astro on the right, and then just accelerate through the corner quite aggressively. Try not to be too close to the curb again where the grip is, and again into the next braking zone. We're going to use that 150 board as our reference to slow the car down, and again right in the middle of the track, just braking a little bit off to the center, to the left slightly, and that's where the grip is. And then you can actually get back onto the dry line here without losing too much grip. I was quite impressed with how this fell over what it used to be like. It's definitely a noticeable improvement that Gran Turismo has made with the wet physics, and I think even when I was driving it in the full wet conditions, it was definitely better. I think a lot of people that didn't like the wet before are going to have a much better time now. You should see less incidents. I think you're going to see a lot more consistency from people, so hopefully the wet races could be a little bit better now. Now we're jumping a little bit further on in the time trial here on lap 6. This was on a separate go. I jumped on straight away, no real practice, just jumped in just to see what the weather was going to do. And you can see there the weather is going to start ending by the time you get into the midway point of lap 6, and then by the time you at the start of lap 7 it's completely gone and it's going to start drying out. Now this is a factor because in the World Series race, which I checked out, they were pitting around lap 8 or 9 I think it was, and in this it's going to be probably similar. If anything, it might dry up a little bit quicker for us with 16 cars on the track, because in the World Finals they only have 12 cars on the track. So factor that into your strategy here. You can see the track here at this stage on the end of lap 8 there is looking quite dry, and I reckon with 16 cars that's going to be a fairly comfortable pit stop for the hard tyres. So do remember though, it's down to your preference. Be cautious if you think there's a bit of a risk. You can see in the time trial I didn't take any risk, because in the time trial the track is not drying up anywhere near as quick as what it will in the actual race. But when it comes to the race, you're going to have a lot of other cars. It's kicking the spray up and it's going to dry a lot quicker. So we're going to move on to the end of lap 10 here, where I'm going into the pits on this lap. We're going to put the hard tyre on, so straight into the pits. Now you won't be refueling up in your races, because there is no, I think, ×1 fuel, ×1 tyre wear. So the fuel is not going to be a factor, especially with the wet drive, and you use a little bit less fuel in the wet. So you do not need to worry about fuel. Now one thing to make sure you do is put traction control. When you're coming out of that pit lane on the hard tyres, make sure you put the TC on before you come out, because it could save you a big spin. Now that is a really important reminder, especially in lower lobbies. You're going to see a lot of people getting straight onto that throttle when they go onto the hard tyre and spinning. So be cautious of that, and it might save you a lot of time. It might even gain you some positions where you're aware of it. Now even on lap 1 you might want to use TC briefly just to see how it feels, but I did actually find that the grip was pretty nice straight away. It definitely feels better even on the dry tyres on a slightly wet track. The grip feels much better than what it used to. Now you can see by the time we get to lap 18 here, randomly the weather just appears. If you were looking at the weather radar there, it just randomly shoots up with the rain on the screen, and it does start getting to the point where you can see like heavy spells building up, and they do just randomly appear, the blue, the dark blue. So it is really important that you think about your strategy here, because two strategies can work. Now I'm going to go into the pits and put on intermediate tyres. Now I actually think here at this stage I could have done another lap on this lap 19 and probably done a pit stop at the end of lap 20. Now in the GT World Series final, I think they were pitting at around about this stage, but remember, only 12 cars on the track again, so it might, it all depends, and they're obviously going to be a little bit faster though, so you do need to factor that in. But as we come out of the pits here on lap 20, we can actually see that that rain's dispersed a bit. We come out and it's kind of disappeared. That heavy blue bit's kind of gone, and I think we could have easily have got away with another lap, because by the time we get to the end of lap 20 here, you can see that the track is still pretty much suitable for dry tyres. You could have got away with it, and the relevance of that is, if you're going to go onto the full wet tyres, if you end up doing a lap where the track isn't fully wet, it's going to burn them up and use a lot of their life. So the later you can pit, the better for the wet tyre. Now I'm on the intermediates here because I just wanted to try it out. Now there is going to be a way of doing this where you go onto the inters early, get the pace in with the inters, gain a bit of an advantage, and then pit again on around lap 24, because you can see when we get to lap 24 here, it is really wet. This is definitely heavy, full wet tyre weather now, and you've still got 6 laps to go, so it's 100% a wet condition situation on the track. So yeah, it is going to be totally up to you how you do this, whether you go inters to full wets or just go that lap extra and then go to full wet straight away and save yourself a pit stop. It's going to be a very interesting race. I think both strategies worked in the World Finals. I think Fragger did the inters to the wets, and I think Killian did the straight onto the wet tyre and won the race, but Fragger was right behind him with the other strategy. So yeah, think about how you want to do the race. It's going to be an interesting one, but remember to buy them wet tyres. Now I hope this has helped you out. I'm going to link in a video for a dry tyre practice lap there for a guide for you as well. It should be on the screen now that you can pick, so click that if you want to see a lap in the dry. It's in driving with the Audi, so it's not with the Porsche, but hopefully it should help you out. Anyway, take care everyone. I'll see you for more videos in the future.